Hello, my friends. Are you ready? Here we go. Let's talk narrative. I thought for this last one, it might be a really great experience to get you onto the Smarter Balanced practice test site and actually look at one of the ones that they offer for narrative. And they offer one at the 6th grade level. So keep that in mind. If you have a younger child, 3rd, 4th, or 5th, they can absolutely handle this. Their story will probably just be shorter, and a single paragraph or a couple of paragraphs would be totally fine. If you have a 6th, 7th, or 8th grader, I'm really going to encourage you to be thinking in threes. 3 paragraphs makes for a nice story, a beginning, a middle, and an end. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Now here it is. This is the site, and you can simply go to sampleitems.smarterbalance.org to get started, and then you can narrow and filter it down to the 6th grade. I'll send you the link as well. Couple things to remember. Be sure that your child knows that if this ends up being where they land for their performance task, that they want to first take a look at what will they be asked to do. So they should read this assignment piece, which is going to tell them that, hey, you're going to have to write this fictional story. It needs to be an exciting adventure, tells you what to have in it. It gives you sources to read. And if you click on this and expand it like so, then it's a little easier to read. And you'll actually see, here's source number 1. The 3 R's of folding time, Grand Canyon style. And here they are, the 3 R's: rocks, river, and erosion. Then you have source 2 and source 3 and source 4. For our practice over the next 2 weeks, I just went ahead and copied this first part just so that we could practice that. And it's something to keep in mind, no matter what grade your child is completing, you want to use some of what you learned in one of the sources into the story. It shows that those that are reading and evaluating your child's work, they will see that they read the work and that your child actually put in some of that information into the story. Really important to do that. Okay, a couple other things before I head out of here and move over to the article. Don't forget, there's a dictionary. So if a child runs across a word that they did not know, they can click on the dictionary. I don't think it'll show it from this vantage point, but it would pop up here. And then you could put in the word that you were confused about. And what a lot of people don't know is it also offers a thesaurus. Can't see it right now, but I promise you it does on the actual test. All right, so just kind of keep that in mind. Other things that are important, if your child were reading this and your child was like, ooh, I may need to remember limestone, sandstone, and shale, you can actually highlight things. Come over here and look at that, highlight that selection. And it will stay that way so that later I can come back and find that easily if I wanted to add that into my story. Okay? All right. So what I have for you in Teachable is this. So it has that part about what you're being asked to do, and I even underlined the really important part. So take your time with your child and read through that. These are those links that I promised you that'll take you to the site. And then here's that article, right? The 3 R's, there's the rocks, there's the river, and there's the erosion. So you could just use this, but I did say you could use just this one. You could find a different one. You could use all 4. If you have an older child, 7th, 6th, 7th, or 8th grader, you may want them to. Totally up to you. Okay, so you're going to be reading that. Now, let's move over to what we're going to do with that. This is kind of the same thing. Remember, stories are graded on 3 areas. How organized is your story? Now, that's going to be what I refer to as your BME, beginning, middle, and end. Then, how well is it developed? That's when I use something called SWBS. Your somebody wanted but so. And then conventions will always be your grammar and mechanics, your spelling, your vocabulary, etc. All right, remember too, you will be typing yours in for the state test. But when you're done, will you do me a favor? make sure you do spell check before you exit out. It's really, really important. All right, so let's talk about these different parts. Now, when I'm writing a narrative, I actually like to collect information, thoughts, and ideas, and then plot out my story. All right, I always say it, plot it before you write it. And I use this acronym, SWBS, SWBS. Somebody wanted but so. Now, I could challenge you. You could read any story, especially short stories, like think of The Little Red Hen. Do you remember that story, The Little Red Hen? Sure. Who was the somebody, the little red hen? What did she want? She wanted to bake bread. But it was such a daunting task. She needed the help of her friends, but they wouldn't help her. So by the time she was done, she didn't share her bread and she ate it all by herself. When you look at most short stories, especially, there's a very clear SWBS. And if you remember that, and let's say it's test day and you're going to take your test and you see you got narrative and you just write on your paper SWBS, that'll remind you later after you read the sources and the articles, like, okay, I've got to come up with a somebody in my story, what that somebody wants, and something's got to happen, right? There's got to be a problem. And then there's a SOS, which is going to be the solution. Okay, so this is what I've come up with as just a sample to show you. So let's say that somebody is going to be me, and I'm a teacher and I'm leading a group of students back up the Grand Canyon, because my story has to take place in the Grand Canyon just like yours, after we had spent the night at the bottom. And what I want at some point in my story is that I find out there's this eagle's nest and I want to get a closer look. But something's got to happen, right? This is the problem. Uh-oh. So I'm going to start climbing that shale surface. See how I'm already pulling words from that? Excuse me. And I'm going to fall 10 feet. Oh no, and sprain my ankle. So what's going to happen then? My students are going to have to create a safe and sturdy way to get me safely back to the top. And there I have it. I have a whole story lined out in just a few sentences. I promise you, if you do this first, it makes writing the story so much easier. And I promise you, it makes the story better, makes it more interesting. Now, the other acronym you'll hear me refer to is the POV. Now, that's the point of view. And I don't know if you've ever noticed this before, but somebody always has to tell the story. That person is called the narrator. Now, there are two ways that a point of view can be expressed in a story. Either the main character can tell the story. That's called the first person point of view. So in my case, I'm going to be the teacher. It's going to be happening to me. I'm going to use first person POV. I'm going to be telling the story. However, if I didn't want to do that, I could choose what's called the third person point of view. That's where I have a narrator, an outside person telling the story. It could be one of the students who was there. It could have been somebody who, a ranger who heard the story later on, right? The third person is just telling it from their point of view, but they weren't the one that it happened to directly. All right, does that make sense? So you need to think about who's going to tell your story. Are you going to tell your story? Or are you going to have somebody else tell your story? Once you decide, you need to stick with that. Okay? Don't keep going back and forth. Pick one and stick with it. All right. Last but not least, we're ready to talk about the BME. The beginning, middle, and end. If that's one paragraph for you, it's still a beginning sentence, a middle sentence, and an ending sentence. If you're writing multiple paragraphs, you could do a whole beginning paragraph, a whole middle paragraph, a whole ending paragraph. No matter what, the organization is important. Beginning, middle, and end, the BME. So just like in anything else that we would write, I always get in my mind that I want to think up a hook. It's just good to have a hook, a question, a quote, or a fact. Now, it's my story, so I kind of make up whatever I want. It's still kind of a nice way, so I'm kind of thinking that in my head. But in the beginning of my story, I'm going to decide, I think it'll be early in the morning, and we're going to be packing up. We'd spent the night before. We're going to have a light breakfast, and then we're going to start our hike up the Grand Canyon. That's how I'm going to start it. Now, are those full sentences? Nope. This is just an outline form. But I'm just writing it with a few words to remind me of what I want to have happen in the start. Now, in the middle, there we are hiking, right? And we're going to be talking, hiking, taking pictures. Somebody in my group, I don't even know who yet, is going to notice that there's this eagle's nest. And I'm going to be like, oh, great idea. I'll go get a close picture. I don't want the kids to get hurt, so I'm going to go do it. And in the middle is where my problem happens, right? We've got to have a problem, a conflict. I'm going to fall 10 feet and sprain my ankle. All right. So in the SWBS, we've got the somebody is me wanting to go get a picture of that eagle's nest, but I fall 10 feet and sprain my ankle. And the end is now going to be my so. So what's going to happen, right? We need to have a solution. My students are going to have to devise a plan and carry me up. And I've decided at this point, they will do it successfully. I still don't know how, but that's okay. As I write my story, it's going to all come together. For now, I just need the big ideas, beginning, middle, end. Now, before I'm done with that, I want to go back and look at that article. Because if you remember, and this is so important, I need to use words from the sources that were on the test to help me develop my story. So it talked about the Colorado River. It used the word erosion, heavy rain, tributary. There were words like limestone, sandstone, shale. It mentioned John Muir. Notebooks, pictures, 250 hikers need assistance every year. And by the way, this was from reading all the articles. If you just read the one article I gave you, which is fine for this, you may not have all of these different pieces. All right. And then I also saw something about hiking poles, being careful of the ecosystem. I don't know that I'm going to use all of those facts that I read about, but do you notice that I placed some in the beginning, some in the middle, and some in the end of my outline to remind myself to add those into my story, okay? Okay. From here, it's all coming together. Now I'm actually going to write my story, the beginning, the middle, and the end. So I want you to do that. Go do that, and then come on back. I'll have another video waiting for you. We'll talk more about dialogue and sensory description, and a few other great things. So just get this started. I know you're going to do a great story, and I'm super excited for you. Take care and ride on.